Welcome to Nightshift Horror. Before we check in tonight, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now get comfortable. The night shift is about to begin.
Story 1. Camera 6 never lost signal. I watched the timestamp correct itself in real time. The patient who walked through the intake door at 11:47 p.m. couldn't have been there. The ambulance dispatch log showed arrival at 11:52. 5 minutes of footage that shouldn't exist. 5 minutes of a woman in a hospital gown, calmly filling out admission paperwork, writing answers to questions no one had asked yet. Camera 6 had recorded something that hadn't happened. My name is Rebecca Hollis, and I worked as a psychiatric intake nurse at Wellspring Behavioral Health Center for 7 years. My primary responsibility during night shifts was monitoring the live security feeds while processing admissions. Camera 6 covered the intake room, a small fluorescent-lit space with beige walls, a desk, 2 chairs, and a panic button beneath the reception counter. In 7 years, Camera 6 never malfunctioned. Not once. The system logs confirmed this. 0 maintenance calls, 0 signal interruptions. It was the most reliable piece of equipment in the building. That's why I couldn't explain what I saw on February 9th. The shift started normally. I arrived at 10 p.m., logged into the monitoring station, and reviewed the day's incident reports. Nothing unusual. 3 voluntary admissions, 1 72-hour hold, standard medication adjustments. The building settled into its night rhythm. Muted conversations from the resident wing, the distant hum of the HVAC system, the occasional squeak of a nurse's shoes on linoleum. At 11:47 p.m., movement on Camera 6 caught my attention. A woman entered the intake room. She wore a standard-issue hospital gown, pale blue with small white dots. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders. She moved calmly, deliberately, and sat in the visitor's chair facing the desk. She reached forward, picked up the admission clipboard I'd prepared for the next arrival, and began filling out the forms. I stared at the monitor. No ambulance had arrived. The night entrance was locked. The intake room door required badge access, and the system showed no entry logged. Yet there she was, writing steadily, turning pages, her hand moving in smooth, practiced strokes. I checked the dispatch log. The next scheduled admission was an 11:55 p.m. ETA. A voluntary transfer from County General, a woman named Patricia Voss, age 34. Preliminary diagnosis of acute dissociative episode. I looked back at Camera 6. The woman continued writing. She flipped to the medical history page. Her posture was relaxed. She wasn't agitated or confused. She filled out each section methodically, as if she'd done this before. I called down to the night entrance. Marcus, the security officer on duty, answered on the second ring. "Marcus, did anyone just come through intake?" "Negative. Building's locked. Next arrival's still 10 minutes out." "Can you do a sweep of the intake area?" "Sure. Give me 2 minutes." I kept my eyes on Camera 6. The woman set down the pen, folded her hands in her lap, and stared directly at the camera. Not through it, at it. Her expression was neutral, almost serene. She didn't blink. Marcus's voice crackled through the radio. "Intake room's empty, Rebecca. Clipboard's still blank on the desk. Everything looks normal." I glanced at the monitor. The woman remained in the chair, hands folded, staring at the lens. "Marcus, are you sure? I'm looking at Camera 6 right now. I'm standing in the room, there's nobody here." I watched the screen. The timestamp in the corner read 11:49 p.m. The woman stood, walked to the door, and paused with her hand on the handle. She turned back toward the camera, and for 3 seconds she smiled. Then she opened the door and walked out of frame. Marcus radioed again. Rebecca, the door just opened. I'm looking right at it. Nobody came through. Stay there, I said. I pulled up the entrance camera feed. At 11:52 p.m., exactly as scheduled, an ambulance pulled into the circular drive. 2 paramedics exited, opened the rear doors, and helped a woman step down. Dark hair, pale blue hospital gown, Patricia Voss. She looked exactly like the woman I'd seen on camera 6 5 minutes earlier. I rewound camera 6 to 11:47 p.m. The intake room was empty. The clipboard sat undisturbed on the desk. No movement, no visitor. The timestamp rolled forward. 11:48, 11:49, 11:50. Nothing. I checked the system logs. No recording gaps, no overwrites. Camera 6 had been broadcasting continuously. Marcus escorted Patricia Voss to the intake room at 11:54 p.m. She sat in the visitor's chair and began filling out the admission forms. Her handwriting was neat, controlled. She answered every question without hesitation, as if she already knew what would be asked. I processed her intake myself. Standard questions: name, date of birth, primary concerns, medication history. She answered each one calmly. Her affect was flat but cooperative. When I asked if she'd ever been admitted to Wellspring before, she paused. "I don't think so," she said, "but it feels familiar." I printed her admission wristband and escorted her to the evaluation wing. The rest of the shift passed without incident. At 6 a.m., I filed my nightly report and logged out of the monitoring system. Before leaving, I reviewed camera 6 one last time, scrubbing through the footage from 11:45 to midnight. At 11:47 p.m., the intake room was empty. At 11:54 p.m., Patricia Voss entered with Marcus. 7 minutes of footage, no gaps, no anomalies. But when I checked the metadata, something had changed. The file properties listed the recording duration as 12 minutes, not 7, 12. 5 minutes were embedded in the footage, inaccessible through normal playback. I tried exporting the file, but the system flagged it as corrupted. I submitted a maintenance request. The technician arrived the next afternoon. He ran diagnostics, reviewed the logs, and replaced the storage drive as a precaution. He found no errors. Camera 6 was functioning perfectly. Patricia Voss remained in the evaluation wing for 72 hours, then transferred voluntarily to the residential program. Her treatment plan was unremarkable. She attended group therapy, took her medication, and showed steady improvement. On the 5th day, during a one-on-one session, her psychiatrist noted that she demonstrated unusual familiarity with facility layout and daily routines. On the 7th day, I passed her in the hallway. She was walking with another patient, discussing weekend visitation policies. She saw me, stopped, and smiled. "You were there when I came in," she said. "Yes," I replied. "I processed your intake." She tilted her head slightly. "No. Before that." I didn't respond. She continued down the hall. That night I reviewed camera 6 again. The footage was clean. The timestamps matched. The recording was continuous and intact. But when I zoomed in on the intake room desk at 11:47 p.m., I could see the clipboard. It wasn't blank. The top page showed handwriting. Neat, controlled, identical to Patricia Voss's. The form was filled out completely. I submitted an incident report. My supervisor reviewed the footage and found nothing irregular. The case was closed as a documentation error. Patricia Voss was discharged after 21 days. Her exit interview was standard. She thanked the staff, collected her belongings, and left through the main entrance. Camera 6 recorded her departure at 2:33 p.m. At 2:34 p.m., the intake room door opened on its own. No badge access, no motion alert. The door simply swung inward, held open for exactly 5 seconds, then closed. I watched it happen live. Marcus checked the room. Empty. I checked the system logs. No entry recorded. Camera 6 never lost signal. That's what made it reliable. That's what made it impossible to dismiss. Some footage doesn't lie. It just shows you what already happened, even if it hasn't occurred yet. And some patients arrive long before the ambulance pulls in, filling out forms that won't exist until someone else writes them. Story 2. The empty corridor log. The motion alert came through at 2:14 a.m. Corridor 7, sub-level 2. I pulled up the camera feed and watched a nurse escort a patient down the hallway, checking doors, documenting the round in a logbook I'd never seen issued. The problem was simple. Corridor 7 didn't exist on any active floor plan, and according to the access log, my badge had authorized the door every night for the past 6 months. My name is Daniel Garrett, and I worked hospital security at Wellspring Behavioral Health Center for 11 years. My duties included monitoring access points, responding to code alerts, and conducting hourly perimeter sweeps. I knew every corridor, every locked door, every blind spot in the camera grid. I knew the building's layout better than the architectural plans filed in administration. That's why Corridor 7 made no sense. The first alert occurred on March 3rd, 2:14 a.m. exactly. I was seated at the security desk in the main lobby reviewing badge logs from the previous shift. The motion detection system chimed, a soft two-tone notification indicating movement in a restricted area. The alert displayed on my monitor. Corridor 7, sub-level 2. Unauthorized movement detected. I pulled up the corresponding camera feed. The image was clear. A long hallway approximately 60 feet lined with 8 patient rooms, 4 on each side. Pale green walls, recessed lighting, standard psychiatric ward layout. A nurse in navy scrubs walked slowly down the corridor, pausing at each door to check the observation window, then making notes on a clipboard. The nurse's movements were calm, methodical. She checked each room in sequence, left side first, then right. At the end of the corridor, she opened a door marked Staff Only, stepped through, and the feed went static for 2 seconds before resuming. Empty hallway, lights still on. I checked the facility map on my secondary monitor. Sub-level 2 housed storage, mechanical systems, and the old records archive. No patient wards, no active corridors. According to the floor plan, the space where Corridor 7 appeared was listed as a decommissioned service tunnel, sealed during renovations in 2012. I radioed the overnight charge nurse. "Emma, do we have any staff assigned to sub-level 2? "Negative? Why?" "I'm getting a motion alert. Can you confirm all nurses are accounted for?" "Stand by." A pause. "Everyone's on their assigned floors." "What's the alert location?" "Corridor 7. Silence. "Daniel, there is no Corridor 7. "I'm looking at it right now." I heard her typing. "Sub-level 2 is inactive, has been for years. Are you sure the camera feed isn't looping old footage?" I checked the timestamp overlay, 03:02.1447 a.m. Current date and time. "It's live," I said. "I'll come down." I kept the feed open on my monitor while I pulled up the access control log. The system tracked every badge swipe, every door unlock, every entry and exit. I filtered by location. Sub-level 2. 17 entries in the past 6 months, all between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m., all authorized by badge number 8844, my badge. I stared at the screen. I'd never accessed sub-level 2 during night shifts. I'd never even been asked to. My rounds were limited to the main floors, the residential wings, and the perimeter exits. Emma arrived at the security desk at 2:28 a.m. I showed her the footage. She watched the nurse complete the corridor check, make her notes, and exit through the staff door. "That's protocol," Emma said quietly. "That's exactly how we conduct night rounds." "Do you recognize the nurse?" She leaned closer. "No, but the uniform's outdated. We switched to the current scrubs 3 years ago." I rewound the footage and paused on a frame showing the nurse's profile. The image was clear enough to distinguish features. Short blonde hair, glasses, medium build. But I didn't recognize her. Emma pulled out her phone and flipped through staff photos. Not current, not anyone I know. I ran the badge access log back further. 1 year, 2 years. The entries appeared consistently every night, always at 2:14 a.m., always authorized by badge 8844. "Daniel," Emma said slowly, "where's your badge right now?" I unclipped it from my belt and held it up. "Right here." She took it, turned it over, and read the number stamped on the back. 8844. I pulled up the live feed from Corridor 7. The hallway was empty now, lights dimmed, doors closed. I switched to the access log. At 2:14 a.m., an entry was recorded. Badge 8844, authorized access. Corridor 7, sublevel 2. "That's impossible," I said. "I've been sitting here the entire shift." Emma checked the main entrance log. It showed my clock-in time, 9:53 p.m., and my current status as on-duty main lobby. No conflicting entries. "We need to check the actual door," she said. We descended the south stairwell to sub-level 2. The air grew cooler as we went down, and the fluorescent lights flickered intermittently. The stairwell door opened onto a wide hallway with exposed ductwork and concrete floors. No patient rooms, no nurses' station, just storage cages and maintenance equipment. We walked the perimeter. Boiler room, electrical panels, archived file storage, no corridor, no patient ward. Emma checked her facility map app. According to this, we're standing where Corridor 7 should be. I looked around. Concrete walls, utility pipes, a row of locked storage cages containing old office furniture and medical equipment covered in dust. "It's not here," I said. We returned to the security desk at 2:51 a.m. I reviewed the footage again, frame by frame, the nurse conducting rounds. The patient room doors, the observation windows, the staff exit. I zoomed in on one of the doors. A small placard beside the frame read, "Room 2704. I cross-referenced the room numbering system. Every patient room in Wellspring followed a 3-part format: floor number, wing identifier, room number. 2704 indicated floor 2, wing 7, room 4. There was no wing 7 on floor 2. I pulled archived floor plans from the database going back 15 years. In 2008, the facility had undergone a major expansion. The plans showed a proposed 7th wing on the 2nd floor. 8 patient rooms, a nurse's station, a group therapy space. The project was approved, funded, and scheduled for completion in 2010. I searched for the final inspection report. The file was marked Project Discontinued, no completion date, no explanation, no incident report, just a single administrative note. Wing 7 construction suspended indefinitely. Staff reassignment in progress. I opened the personnel archive and searched for staff assigned to Wing 7 between 2008 and 2010. 4 names appeared, 3 nurses, 1 security officer. The security officer's name was listed as Daniel Garrett, badge number 8844. I read the entry 3 times. My employment start date at Wellspring was 2014, 4 years after Wing 7 was discontinued. Emma looked over my shoulder. "That's not you. Same name, same badge number." "Badge numbers get reissued," she said. "It's not uncommon." I pulled my personnel file, employment start date, January 2014. Previous employment, County Hospital Security Detail, 2009 to 2013. Before that, military service. No record of working at Wellspring before 2014. But the access log showed otherwise. I returned to the live feed. Corridor 7 was dark now, only emergency lighting visible. As I watched, the staff door at the end of the hallway opened slowly. A figure stepped through, navy scrubs, blonde hair, clipboard in hand. The nurse walked the corridor again, checking doors, taking notes. The timestamp read 02:14:03 a.m., the same time, every night. Emma stared at the screen. Is that feed live? I checked the system status. Live broadcast. Camera SL2C7. Active. The nurse completed her round and exited through the staff door. The feed remained active. Empty corridor, lights dimmed. I checked the access log. Badge 8844. Authorized access. Corridor 7, sublevel 2, 02:14 hours a.m. I was still sitting at the desk. My badge was clipped to my belt. Emma backed away from the monitor. I'm calling the director. Wait, I said. I opened the archived incident reports and searched for entries related to Wing 7. One file appeared, dated November 2009. Incident Report 4721, Staff Disorientation Event. The report described an incident in which multiple staff members reported memory gaps and confusion regarding their assigned duties. Several employees claimed to have worked shifts they had no recollection of. Badge access logs showed entry records that staff insisted were inaccurate. The incident occurred in Wing 7. The report concluded with a recommendation. Discontinue Wing 7 operations pending psychological evaluation of affected personnel. I scrolled to the attached personnel list. My name was there. Daniel Garrett, Security Officer, Badge 8844. Beside it, a note. Employee reports no memory of assigned duties in Wing 7. Access logs indicate nightly rounds conducted between 02 and 02:30 over a 6-month period. Employee insists he was assigned to main lobby during these times. Psychological evaluation recommended. The report was filed 2 months before Wing 7 was officially discontinued. I looked at Emma. She was reading the same file on her phone, her face pale. This was 15 years ago, I said. I wasn't working here. She didn't respond. I pulled up the live feed one last time. The corridor was empty. The lights were off. The timestamp read 03:04:58 a.m. And then, at the far end of the hallway, a door opened. Room 2704. A figure stepped into the corridor. Security uniform, flashlight in hand. The figure walked slowly toward the camera, checking each door, shining the light into the observation windows. As the figure moved closer, I could see the face clearly. It was me. Emma grabbed my shoulder. Daniel, you need to leave right now. I couldn't move. I watched the figure on the screen approach the camera, stop directly in front of the lens and stare into it. The footage froze. The timestamp corrected itself. 11:04/2009, 02:14 a.m. Then it resumed. Live feed, current date. The corridor was empty. I checked my personnel file one more time. Employment start date. November 2009, not 2014, 2009. Emma was already on the phone with the director. I heard her voice, distant and distorted, explaining what we'd seen. I looked at my badge. Number 8844. I'd been conducting nightly rounds in Corridor 7 for 15 years. I just didn't remember starting. Story 3. Patient 341 was already watching. I reviewed the session recording before entering the room, a standard precaution for nonverbal patients. Patient 341 was heavily sedated, eyes closed, head tilted against the padded chair. But when I scrubbed through the footage, I noticed his eyes open at minute marker 247. 11 seconds before I unlocked the door. He tracked my approach through the wall, and when I finally entered, his lips moved in perfect sync with my greeting, 3 full seconds before I spoke. My name is Dr. Evelyn Marsh, and I've been an attending psychiatrist at Wellspring Behavioral Health Center for 9 years. My primary focus is acute dissociative disorders and trauma-related catatonia. I specialize in patients who present with extreme withdrawal, selective mutism, or profound disengagement from their environment. Patient 341 was admitted on April 16th under an involuntary 72-hour hold following a dissociative fugue episode. Law enforcement found him standing motionless in a shopping center parking lot at 3 a.m., unresponsive to verbal stimuli, showing no recognition of his surroundings or identity. His intake assessment noted complete absence of verbal communication, minimal motor response, and a flat affect consistent with severe catatonia. No identification. No missing persons report matching his description. Estimated age, mid-30s. Physical health, unremarkable. Psychological state, profoundly detached. He was assigned to Evaluation Room 4, a secure observation space equipped with soft furniture, minimal stimuli, and continuous video monitoring. Standard protocol for high-risk, nonverbal patients. I was assigned his case on April 18th. Before conducting my first session, I reviewed the surveillance footage from his room. A routine step I took with all nonverbal patients to assess baseline behavior, identify potential triggers, and observe patterns invisible during direct interaction. The footage began at his admission, 8:32 p.m. on April 16th. For the first 72 hours, patient 341 remained almost entirely motionless. He sat in the cushioned chair positioned against the back wall, hands resting on his thighs, head tilted slightly downward. His eyes remained closed. He did not respond to nursing checks, meal delivery, or medication administration. He accepted sedation without resistance but showed no change in presentation afterward. On April 18th at 10:15 a.m., I arrived at Evaluation Room 4 to conduct our initial session. Before entering, I checked the live feed from the room's ceiling-mounted camera. Patient 341 was seated as usual, motionless, eyes closed, sedated. I reviewed my prepared questions, gathered my clipboard and digital recorder, and unlocked the door using my badge at 10:17 a.m. The footage I reviewed later that afternoon told a different story. At minute marker 2:47, corresponding to 10:16 and 47 seconds, patient 341's eyes opened. Not suddenly, not in response to external stimuli. They simply opened, pupils dilating slightly, adjusting to the dim room lighting. His head remained tilted downward, but his eyes moved, tracking horizontally from left to right, then upward, fixing on the door. 11 seconds before I unlocked it. His gaze remained steady, unblinking, focused on the door. Not the camera, not the observation window, the door. At 10:17 a.m. exactly, I swiped my badge. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Patient 341's lips moved. The footage had no audio, standard for patient observation cameras to maintain privacy during documented sessions. But the lip movement was clear. A single phrase spoken slowly, shaped precisely. I paused the recording and zoomed in. Frame by frame, I analyzed the movement. "Good morning." He'd mouthed the words 3 seconds before I entered the room and spoke them aloud. I sat at my desk, staring at the frozen frame. His expression was neutral, no visible emotion. His eyes remained fixed on the door. I resumed the footage. At 10:17 and 14 seconds, I entered the room, closed the door behind me, and greeted him verbally. "Good morning." Patient 341 did not react. His eyes remained open but unfocused. He gave no indication of awareness. I proceeded with the session as planned, explaining who I was, outlining the purpose of our meeting, and asking a series of baseline questions designed to assess cognitive function and reality orientation. He did not respond to any question. He did not make eye contact. His breathing remained steady and shallow. The session lasted 40 minutes. I concluded by informing him I would return the following day. As I stood to leave, he closed his eyes. I documented the session as patient unresponsive to verbal stimuli. Continued observation recommended. That afternoon, I reviewed the footage a second time. At minute marker 6:12, approximately 10:23 a.m. during my session, patient 341's lips moved again. I zoomed in and played the segment frame by frame. He mouthed my next question 11 seconds before I asked it aloud. "Can you tell me your name?" I scrubbed forward. At minute marker 14:50, the pattern repeated. His lips moved, shaping words I wouldn't speak for another 18 seconds. "Do you know where you are?" I checked the session timestamp against the video metadata. No discrepancies. The footage was recorded in real time. No edits. No loops. Patient 341 was responding to questions I hadn't asked yet. I filed a consultation request with our neurological specialist, Dr. Alan Voss, describing the observed behavior as possible evidence of precognitive confabulation or temporal disorientation. Dr. Voss reviewed the footage and noted the lip movements, but suggested an alternative explanation. Patient 341 might be experiencing echolalia or palilalia, involuntary repetition of perceived speech, with a neurological processing delay that created the illusion of anticipation. It was plausible. I scheduled a follow-up session for April 19th at 9:45 a.m. I reviewed the live feed before entering evaluation room 4. Patient 341 sat motionless, eyes closed. I entered at 9:50 a.m. The session followed the same structure. I asked questions. He did not respond. His eyes remained closed throughout the entire 40-minute interaction. I reviewed the footage immediately afterward. At minute marker 0:43, 9:50 and 43 seconds, less than 1 minute after I entered, patient 341 opened his eyes and looked directly at the camera. Not toward the camera, at it. His gaze was focused, deliberate. He held eye contact for 7 seconds, then shifted his attention back to the door. Throughout the rest of the session, his eyes remained open. He tracked my movements precisely. When I leaned forward to adjust my recorder, when I shifted in my chair, when I stood to retrieve a dropped pen, his gaze followed me with perfect accuracy. But during the live session, his eyes had been closed. I returned to my office and cross-referenced the footage timestamp with my handwritten session notes. My notes clearly stated, patient's eyes remained closed, no visual tracking observed. I had been in the room. I had watched him directly. His eyes had not opened. Yet the footage showed otherwise. I contacted our surveillance systems technician, Marcus Lowe, and requested a full diagnostic review of the camera in evaluation room 4. He ran tests that afternoon and confirmed the equipment was functioning normally. No recording errors, no playback distortion. The footage was accurate. I scheduled a third session for April 20th at 10 a.m. That morning, I made a deliberate change to my routine. Instead of reviewing my prepared questions in the hallway, I randomized them. I wrote 20 questions on individual index cards, shuffled them, and selected 5 at random. I did not review the chosen questions before entering the room. I arrived at evaluation room 4 at 9:58 a.m. Patient 341 was seated, eyes closed. I entered at 10 a.m. exactly. I sat across from him, activated my digital recorder, and drew the first card. "Do you remember how you arrived here?" No response. Second card. "Have you experienced memory loss before?" No response. I continued through all 5 questions. Patient 341 remained motionless, eyes closed, breathing steady. I concluded the session at 10:34 a.m. and returned to my office. I reviewed the footage immediately. At minute marker 118, 10:01 and 18 seconds, patient 341 opened his eyes. He looked at the camera, then at me. His lips moved. I paused and zoomed in. He mouthed 5 phrases in sequence, each separated by approximately 40 seconds. Do you remember how you arrived here? Have you experienced memory loss before? Can you describe the last thing you recall? Do you recognize this facility? Are you aware of today's date? The exact 5 questions I had drawn at random, in the exact order I had asked them, except he mouthed the words an average of 37 seconds before I spoke them aloud. I reviewed the footage 3 more times. Each repetition confirmed the same sequence, same timing, same precision. I contacted Dr. Voss again. He reviewed the footage personally and requested a neurological consult. An EEG was scheduled for April 21st. The test results showed normal brain activity, no seizures, no evidence of organic pathology. Patient 341 tolerated the procedure without incident and returned to evaluation room 4 at 2 p.m. I reviewed the EEG session footage that evening. At timestamp 14:09, approximately 2:09 p.m., 9 minutes after patient 341 was returned to his room. He opened his eyes. He looked at the camera. His lips moved. I zoomed in and read the phrase carefully. You're asking the wrong questions. I had not been in the room. I had not spoken. He closed his eyes and remained motionless for the rest of the recording. On April 22nd, I modified my approach. Instead of conducting a traditional session, I entered evaluation room 4 and sat silently for 30 minutes. I did not speak. I did not ask questions. I simply observed. Patient 341 did not react. His eyes remained closed. He showed no awareness of my presence. I reviewed the footage afterward. At minute marker 4:56, he opened his eyes and looked directly at me. His lips moved continuously for 2 minutes and 33 seconds. I transcribed the phrases frame by frame. You don't remember the first session. You've asked these questions before. The answers are already in your notes. You documented them correctly. You filed the report, but you don't remember writing it, because I answered 11 seconds before you asked. And your memory adjusted, backward, to make sense of the sequence. But the footage doesn't lie. It shows what happened, not what you remember. I stopped the playback. I opened my patient files and searched for any prior documentation on patient 341. There were 17 session reports. The first was dated March 23rd, 3 weeks before his official admission. Each report was authored by me. Each described a structured interview session. Each included detailed patient responses, full sentences, coherent answers, oriented affect. Each session had been conducted in evaluation room 4. I had no memory of writing any of them. I checked my calendar. March 23rd was a standard workday. My schedule showed a full patient load, including a 10 a.m. session in evaluation room 4. The patient was listed as TBD, pending admission. I pulled the surveillance footage from March 23rd. At 10 a.m., I entered evaluation room 4. The room was empty. I sat in the chair, activated my recorder, and spoke for 40 minutes, asking questions, pausing for responses, taking notes. The camera recorded me conducting a session with no one present. At minute marker 37, I stood, thanked the empty chair, and exited the room. My session report filed that afternoon documented a cooperative patient with clear cognition and intact memory. I reviewed footage from every session date listed in the files. Each recording showed the same pattern. I entered an empty room. I conducted a full interview. I documented detailed responses. Patient 341 did not appear in any footage until April 16th, his official admission date. But the session reports existed. 17 reports spanning 3 weeks, all written by me. All describing sessions that occurred before the patient arrived. On April 23rd, I submitted a formal request to transfer patient 341 to another provider. The request was denied. My supervisor noted that the patient had shown significant improvement under my care and that continuity was essential. I reviewed his chart. His condition was listed as stable and responsive, his prognosis positive, but he hadn't spoken once. That afternoon, I returned to evaluation room 4. Patient 341 sat in his chair, motionless, eyes closed. I sat across from him and asked a question I had not prepared. "When did we meet?" He opened his eyes. He looked directly at me and spoke aloud for the first time. His voice was calm, measured, and entirely familiar. "March 23rd, 10 a.m. You were 11 seconds late." I recognized the voice. It was mine. He closed his eyes. I left the room and filed my final report. I documented the session as completed successfully. I recommended continued observation and scheduled follow-up care. The report was accepted without question. I haven't returned to evaluation room 4 since. But every morning at 10 a.m., the surveillance system logs a motion alert from that room. And every afternoon, a new session report appears in patient 341's file, authored by me, documenting detailed conversations I don't remember having. The footage always shows the same thing: an empty chair, a running recorder, and my voice asking questions that something else has already answered. Story 4. The technician who signed out twice. The timecode audit flagged a 47-second drift on camera 12. Routine maintenance. I pulled the archived footage to verify the timestamp and correct the offset. The recording showed me walking through the main lobby at 6:32 p.m., scanning my badge at the exit, and leaving through the front doors. I was watching footage of myself clocking out. The problem was, I was still sitting at my workstation in the basement reviewing the very footage I was watching. Both badge scans were verified. HR called 3 days later and asked which version of me had submitted the maintenance report. My name is Aaron Fitch, and I worked as the surveillance systems technician at Wellspring Behavioral Health Center for 6 years. My job involved maintaining the facility's security camera network. 47 cameras across 4 floors covering patient wards, administrative offices, corridors, exits, and restricted areas. I monitored camera health, managed storage servers, corrected timecode drift, and ensured that footage met legal retention standards. Most of my work took place in a windowless basement office near the mechanical room. The air smelled faintly of ozone and warm electronics. I kept the lights dim to reduce monitor glare. It was quiet, isolated, and exactly the kind of environment where you notice small inconsistencies. On May 7th, the automated monitoring system flagged an anomaly. Camera 12, located in the main lobby, showed a 47-second timecode drift. Not unusual. Temperature fluctuations, power supply variance, and network latency all contributed to minor synchronization issues. Standard procedure required me to pull the archived footage, identify the drift onset, and apply a corrective offset. I logged into the storage server at 5:48 p.m. and navigated to camera 12's archive. The drift had begun at approximately 6:15 p.m. that same evening. I queued the footage starting at 6:10 p.m. and let it play at normal speed. The lobby appeared normal. Evening shift staff moving between the elevators and the front entrance. A few visitors signing out at the reception desk. Standard activity. At 6:32 and 14 seconds, I appeared on camera. I walked across the lobby from the direction of the south stairwell, moving at a normal pace, carrying my equipment bag over one shoulder. I approached the exit turnstile, removed my badge from my belt, and scanned it at the reader. The indicator light turned green. I pushed through the turnstile and exited through the front doors. I watched myself leave the building. I paused the footage. I looked at the timestamp. 5:07:18:32:14. I checked the time on my workstation. 05:07:18:51:09. I had been sitting in the basement office continuously since 4 p.m. I hadn't left my desk. My badge was clipped to my belt. My equipment bag was on the floor beside my chair. I rewound the footage and watched again. Same sequence, same movements, same badge scan. I zoomed in on the figure's face. The image quality was sufficient to confirm identity. It was me. Same build, same posture, same gait. The figure's employee badge was visible hanging from a lanyard. Aaron Fitch, Systems Technician, badge 7199. I unclipped my badge and checked the number. 7199. I pulled up the access control log and filtered by badge number 7199. 2 entries appeared for May 7th, 16:02:47, badge 7199. Entry, South Stairwell, Basement Access, 18:32:14. Badge 7199, exit main lobby turnstile. The first entry corresponded to my arrival at the basement office at 4 p.m. The second entry corresponded to the footage of me leaving through the lobby. I hadn't left. I checked the badge reader logs for errors or duplicate scans. No anomalies. Both entries were recorded as valid, authenticated scans. I reviewed the footage again, this time extending the playback window. At 6:31 p.m., the figure, me, descended the main staircase into the lobby. I traced the path backward, switching to camera 9, which covered the second floor corridor. At 6:29 p.m., the figure walked from the direction of the administrative wing. I switched to camera 5. At 6:26 p.m., the figure exited the staff elevator on the second floor. I followed the trail backward through 4 more cameras, eventually reaching the south stairwell. The same stairwell I had used to access the basement office at 4 p.m. At 6:23 p.m., the figure emerged from the basement stairwell and proceeded upward toward the main floors. I had been in the basement continuously from 4 p.m. to the present moment. I had not left my office, but the footage clearly showed me leaving the basement at 6:23 p.m., moving through the building and exiting via the main lobby 9 minutes later. I filed an incident report with my supervisor, attaching the relevant footage and access logs. I described the discrepancy as a potential badge cloning issue or a system logging error. My supervisor, Janet Carver, reviewed the materials the following morning. She called me into her office at 10 a.m. "Aaron, I watched the footage. That's definitely you." "I know," I said, "but I didn't leave the basement. I was at my desk the entire time." "Can anyone verify that?" "No." "I work alone." She tapped her pen against the desk. "The badge scans are authenticated. The footage is clear. There's no indication of tampering or cloning." "Then how do you explain it?" She didn't answer immediately. Finally, she said, "I'll escalate it to IT security. In the meantime, keep your badge on you at all times. Don't lend it to anyone." I returned to my office. That afternoon, I reviewed footage from other cameras, searching for any similar anomalies. I found none. Every other staff member's movements aligned with their badge scans and documented schedules. Only my footage showed the discrepancy. On May 9th, I conducted a routine server backup. While verifying file integrity, I noticed an unusual archive entry, a maintenance report filed on May 7th at 6:48 p.m. I opened the file. The report detailed a successful timecode correction for camera 12, noting the 47-second drift and the applied offset. The report was thorough, technically accurate, and included annotated screenshots of the affected footage. It was authored by me, but I hadn't written it. I checked my local workstation files, no draft, no saved copy. The report existed only on the central server. I reviewed the document metadata. The file was created on May 7th at 6:48 p.m., 16 minutes after the footage showed me leaving the building. I checked the access log. At 6:48 p.m., my badge was recorded as off-site. I contacted Janet again. She reviewed the report and confirmed it had been submitted through the standard internal portal, authenticated with my employee credentials. "Did you write this?" she asked. "No. Your login credentials were used, your writing style, your technical annotations. I was at my desk reviewing footage. I didn't submit any report." She forwarded the issue to HR and IT security. On May 12th, I received an email from HR requesting a meeting. I arrived at the HR office at 2 p.m. The HR representative, a woman named Claire Novak, greeted me cordially and gestured to a chair. "Aaron, we've reviewed the incident you reported. We have some questions." "Of course." She opened a folder. "On May 7th, you clocked out at 6:32 p.m. using your badge at the main lobby turnstile. Is that correct?" "No. I was in my office." She showed me a printout of the access log. "Your badge scan is authenticated here." "I didn't leave." "Then how do you explain the footage?" "I can't." She slid another document across the desk, the maintenance report filed at 6:48 p.m. "Did you submit this report?" "No." "It's authored by you. It was submitted using your credentials." "Someone else must have accessed my account." She paused. "Aaron, we also received a second report." She handed me a stapled document. The cover page read, "Timecode Audit Follow-Up, Camera 12 Incident Analysis." The report was dated May 8th. It described a detailed investigation into the timecode drift incident, including an analysis of potential badge cloning, system vulnerabilities, and recommended corrective actions. It was authored by me. I stared at the document. "I didn't write this either." Claire folded her hands. "Aaron, according to our records, you clocked out on May 7th at 6:32 p.m. You returned on May 8th at 7:53 a.m. During that time, 2 maintenance reports were filed under your credentials. Both reports are consistent with your writing style and technical expertise. I didn't write them. Then who did?" I had no answer. She leaned forward. "Here's what concerns us. We have authenticated badge scans, verified login credentials, and detailed technical reports, all pointing to you. But you insist you didn't leave your office and didn't author these documents." "That's correct." "So either the system is experiencing a significant security breach or you're experiencing a memory issue." I didn't respond. She continued, "We're recommending a medical evaluation. It's standard procedure for cases involving potential cognitive disruption." "I don't have a memory issue." "Then help us understand what happened." I returned to my office and reviewed the footage again. Frame by frame, I analyzed the figure's movements, clothing, posture, and behavior. Every detail matched. It was me. I checked my personal belongings. My equipment bag contained the same tools, cables, and devices I'd brought to work that morning. Nothing was missing. Nothing was added. I reviewed the maintenance report filed at 6:48 p.m. The technical details were accurate. The screenshots matched the footage I had reviewed. The recommendations were appropriate. It was exactly the report I would have written. On May 14th, I underwent the medical evaluation. Cognitive function tests, memory assessments, neurological scans, all returned normal results. HR closed the incident as unresolved. No policy violation identified. I returned to work on May 16th. That evening, I reviewed the footage archive as part of my standard duties. At 6:27 p.m., I noticed movement on camera 12, the main lobby. I appeared on screen walking toward the exit. I checked the timestamp, 05:16, 18 on 27:54. I looked at the time on my workstation, 05:16, 18:28, 11. I was watching footage recorded 17 seconds ago. I stood and walked to the small mirror mounted on the wall beside my filing cabinet. I looked at my reflection. Then I looked at the monitor. The figure on camera 12 reached the turnstile, scanned a badge, and exited the building. I checked my belt. My badge was still clipped in place. I pulled up the access log. 18 to 27:58, badge 7199, exit, main lobby turnstile. I sat down slowly. At 6:39 p.m., I received an automated notification. A maintenance report had been submitted. I opened the file. The report detailed a routine camera health check for camera 12. It was thorough, accurate, and included time-stamped observations. It was authored by me. I hadn't written it. I logged out of my workstation, gathered my equipment bag, and left the basement office. I climbed the south stairwell to the main lobby. I approached the turnstile, removed my badge, and scanned it at the reader. 1852-43, badge 7199, exit, main lobby turnstile. I walked through the turnstile and exited through the front doors. The next morning, I received an email from Janet. Aaron, received your maintenance report from last night. Good work. One question, you submitted 2 reports yesterday, one at 1839 and another at 1903. Both are nearly identical. Was the second one an updated version, or did you submit twice by mistake? I opened my sent files. 2 reports, both dated May 16th, both authored by me. The first was submitted at 6:39 p.m., while I was still in the basement. The second was submitted at 7:03 p.m., while I was at home. I don't remember writing either one, but every night at 6:32 p.m. the footage shows me leaving. And every night a maintenance report is filed under my name. Sometimes I remember writing it, sometimes I don't. HR eventually stopped asking which version of me submitted the reports. I think they realized it didn't matter. Both versions are real, both versions clock in and out, both versions do the work. I just can't always tell which one I am. Story 5. Unauthorized presence detected. The motion alert chimed at 1:47 a.m. Room 14, Ward B. A restrained patient flagged for high-risk observation. I pulled up the live feed and watched him stand beside the bed, calm and upright, arms at his sides. The problem was immediate. His wrist and ankle restraints were still secured to the bed frame, straps pulled taut. But he was standing 3 feet away. When I entered the room 20 seconds later, the bed was empty. The restraints hung loose, and the facial recognition overlay identified the figure on camera as staff ID 9236, assigned to me. My name is Laura Kenmore, and I worked as a night shift charge nurse at Wellspring Behavioral Health Center for 8 years. My responsibilities included supervising patient care across 3 acute psychiatric wards, coordinating with attending physicians, and responding to overnight behavioral incidents. Ward B housed our highest acuity patients, individuals requiring close monitoring due to acute psychosis, severe agitation, or risk of self-harm. Room 14 was reserved for patients under physical restraint protocols, equipped with reinforced furnishings, soft walls, and continuous video surveillance. On May 21st, a patient was admitted to room 14 following a violent dissociative episode in the emergency department. The attending psychiatrist ordered 4-point soft restraints, hourly circulation checks, and continuous observation via the mounted camera. The patient, a man in his early 40s but admitted under the name Michael Pruitt, had been sedated and was sleeping soundly when I completed my midnight rounds. At 1:47 a.m., the motion detection system issued an alert. I was seated at the nurse's station reviewing medication schedules. The alert appeared on my monitor. Room 14, Ward B. Unauthorized movement detected. Restraint protocol active. I pulled up the live camera feed. The patient was standing, not struggling against the restraints, not thrashing or pulling. He was standing upright beside the bed, 3 feet from the frame, arms resting naturally at his sides. His posture was relaxed. His head was tilted slightly downward. His hospital gown hung loosely around his shoulders. I zoomed in on the bed. The restraints were still secured, wrist cuffs fastened to the upper corners of the bed frame. Ankle cuffs fastened to the lower corners. The straps were pulled taut, as if still supporting weight, but the patient was standing. I checked the patient's status board. Restraint application time, 23:41. Last circulation check, 00:47, documented by nursing assistant Kevin Moss. Status, restrained and stable. I radioed Kevin. I need you in room 14 immediately. On my way. I kept the feed open and watched. The patient remained motionless. His eyes were closed. His breathing appeared slow and regular, as if he were still asleep. I stood and walked quickly down the corridor toward room 14. Kevin met me at the door, badge in hand. "What's wrong?" he asked, with the patient standing. "That's impossible. I checked the restraints 40 minutes ago." I swiped my badge and unlocked the door. We entered together. The room was dim, lit only by a soft amber nightlight in the corner. The bed was empty. The restraints hung loose, wrist and ankle cuffs unfastened, straps coiled on the mattress. Kevin stared. He was secured. I checked every buckle. I scanned the room. The bathroom door was open, the light off. The observation window showed no obstruction. There was nowhere to hide. The patient was gone. I stepped back into the hallway and checked the adjacent rooms. All doors were locked, all patients accounted for. I returned to the nurse's station and reviewed the camera feed again. I rewound to 1:46 a.m. The patient was in bed, restrained, motionless. At 1:47 and 9 seconds, he stood up, not gradually, not struggling. He simply rose from the bed, the restraints still visibly secured to the frame, and took 3 steps forward. He stood there for 18 seconds, then the feed cut to static for 2 frames, less than 1 second, and resumed showing an empty bed. I checked the hallway camera. At 1:48 a.m., no one exited room 14. Kevin stood beside me watching the footage. Where did he go? I pulled up the building-wide camera grid. No sign of the patient in any corridor, stairwell, or common area. I initiated a code yellow, missing patient protocol marks, and alerted security. Within 5 minutes, a facility-wide search was underway. Security officers checked every exit, every unlocked room, every possible hiding place. Perimeter doors were sealed. External cameras were reviewed. No sign of Michael Pruitt. At 2:36 a.m., I received a call from the night supervisor, Martin Cross. "Laura, we found something." "What?" Facial recognition flagged a match on the room 14 footage. I pulled up the surveillance interface. The system's facial recognition overlay had processed the feed from 1:47 a.m. A small identification box appeared beside the standing figure. Staff ID 9236, Laura Kenmore, RN, Nightshift charge nurse. I stared at the screen. The figure in the footage was male, approximately 6 feet tall, wearing a hospital gown. It was clearly Michael Pruitt, but the facial recognition system identified him as me. Martin's voice came through the phone. "Laura, have you been in room 14 tonight?" I entered at 1:48 to check on the patient. He was already gone. Before that? No. The system is showing a confidence match of 94%. I reviewed the footage again. The figure's face was partially obscured by shadow, but the profile was visible. It was not me. "Run the recognition algorithm again," I said. "There's an error." We did. Same result. I ended the call and pulled up my own badge access log. 21 underground entries on Ward B Nurses Station. No other entries. At 3:12 a.m., security located Michael Pruitt. He was found in the staff break room on the 3rd floor, seated at a table, staring at the wall. He was calm, nonverbal, and offered no resistance when escorted back to Ward B. A medical evaluation found no injuries. He was re-restrained in room 14 and placed under continuous one-on-one observation. I reviewed the 3rd floor camera footage. At 2:17 a.m., Michael Pruitt appeared in the corridor outside the break room. He walked slowly, steadily, directly to the break room door, and entered. No badge, no authorization. The door had been locked, but the access log showed no entry. He had simply walked through it. I submitted a detailed incident report, attaching all relevant footage and access logs. The report was reviewed by administration, security, and our IT systems team. The findings were inconclusive. The restraints had been properly secured. The room had been locked. No exits were accessed. Yet the patient had left the room and traveled 2 floors undetected. And the facial recognition system continued to identify the figure on camera as me. On May 23rd, I returned for my next shift. At the pre-shift briefing, Martin informed me that Michael Pruitt had been transferred to a different facility for specialized evaluation. "We also ran a full diagnostic on the surveillance system," he added. "The facial recognition software is functioning normally, but the algorithm keeps flagging you in footage where you're not present." "What do you mean?" He pulled up his tablet and showed me a series of still frames. Each one showed a patient or staff member in various locations throughout the facility. Ward C corridor, the cafeteria, the medication room, the emergency entrance. In each frame, the facial recognition overlay identified the figure as Staff ID 9236, Laura Kenmore. The faces were different. The builds were different. The clothing was different. But the system insisted each person was me. "IT says it's a database corruption issue," Martin said. "They're working on a fix." I reviewed my own access logs for the past week. Standard entries. Nothing unusual. That night, I conducted my rounds as usual. At 1:47 a.m., a motion alert sounded. Room 14, Ward B. Unauthorized movement detected. I pulled up the feed. A figure stood beside the bed. Same posture, same calm stance. Same hospital gown. I zoomed in. The facial recognition overlay appeared. Staff ID 9236, Laura Kenmore. The figure's face was turned toward the camera. It was my face, not similar, not a resemblance. My exact face, my hair, my features. I stood and walked to the nearest reflective surface, a glass panel beside the nurses' station. I looked at my reflection, then back at the monitor. The figure on the screen tilted its head, mirroring my movement exactly. I stepped away from the glass. The figure on the screen remained still. I approached the monitor and leaned closer. The figure leaned forward in perfect sync. I checked my badge, still clipped to my scrubs. I checked the hallway behind me. Empty. I returned my attention to the monitor. The figure stepped backward away from the bed and walked slowly toward the camera until it filled the frame entirely. Then the feed went black. 2 seconds later, it resumed. The room was empty. The bed was undisturbed. I checked the timestamp, 1:49 a.m. I had been watching the feed for 2 minutes. I radioed security. "I need someone to check room 14. "What's the issue?" "Just check it." A security officer arrived at the room 3 minutes later and radioed back. "Room's empty, beds made, no patient assigned." I pulled up the patient roster. Room 14 was listed as vacant, awaiting cleaning. But I had seen the figure. I had watched it move. I reviewed the archived footage from 1:47 a.m. The recording showed an empty room. No figure, no movement, just an undisturbed bed and ambient lighting. The motion alert remained in the system log. Room 14, Ward B. Unauthorized movement detected as 1:47 a.m. But the footage showed nothing. I filed a maintenance request and completed my shift without further incident. The next morning, I received an email from IT security. The facial recognition system had been reset and recalibrated. The database corruption had been resolved. I returned for my shift on May 25th. At 1:47 a.m., the motion alert sounded again. I didn't pull up the feed. I walked directly to room 14, unlocked the door, and entered. The room was dark, empty. I turned on the overhead light. Standing beside the bed facing the wall was a figure in a hospital gown. I stepped forward. "Excuse me." The figure turned slowly. It was me. Same face, same posture, same uniform beneath the gown. I looked down at myself. I was wearing my scrubs. My badge was clipped to my chest. The figure looked down at itself. It was wearing the same scrubs, the same badge. We stood 3 feet apart, staring at each other. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Kevin's voice called out, "Laura, you okay?" I turned toward the door. When I looked back, the figure was gone. Kevin appeared in the doorway. "What's wrong? Did you see anyone leave this room?" "No. I just saw you enter." I checked the bed. The restraints were fastened, straps pulled taut, as if still holding someone. I stepped into the hallway and reviewed the camera feed on my tablet. The footage showed me entering room 14 at 1:48 a.m. The room was empty. The facial recognition overlay appeared beside my figure. Staff ID 9236, Laura Kenmore, currently admitted, not on duty, not staff access, currently admitted. I checked the patient roster. A new entry had appeared, room 14, Ward B, patient, Laura Kenmore, admission date, 05/25, status, restrained and stable. I showed Kevin the screen. He read it twice, then looked at me. "That's a system error," he said. I nodded, but every night since, the motion alert sounds at 1:47 a.m. And every night the system logs me as currently admitted, restrained in room 14 under continuous observation. I still complete my rounds. I still supervise the wards. But somewhere in the building, in a room I'm afraid to enter again, someone is being monitored, someone wearing my face, someone restrained in a bed I don't remember lying in. And the facial recognition system assures me we're the same person. Story 6. Ward C was never closed. Ward C was decommissioned in March 2017 following an internal incident. All patient records were transferred. All staff were reassigned. The wing was sealed and removed from active floor plans. But when I reviewed archived surveillance footage during a records audit, I found continuous activity. Meals delivered, medication rounds completed, progress notes updated. The staff visible on camera matched former employees, their badges and uniforms outdated. One of the nurses was me, wearing an ID badge I hadn't used in 4 years. My name is Dr. Catherine Briggs, and I served as the psychiatric administrator at Wellspring Behavioral Health Center for 12 years. My role encompassed operational oversight, regulatory compliance, staff credentialing, and facility safety audits. I was responsible for maintaining accurate records of all patient admissions, discharges, and unit operations across the facility's 4 primary wards. Ward A for acute admissions, Ward B for stabilization, Ward C for extended observation, and Ward D for transitional care. In March 2017, Ward C was decommissioned. The decision followed an internal incident, details of which were classified under patient privacy protections, that resulted in the immediate closure of the unit. 16 patients were transferred to other wards or external facilities. 11 staff members were reassigned. The physical space was sealed, locked, and removed from the active facility map pending a comprehensive review by state regulatory authorities. I personally oversaw the closure. I verified every patient transfer. I collected every staff badge with Ward C access. I reviewed the final security sweep conducted by 2 licensed officers, confirming that all rooms were empty, all supplies removed, and all access points secured. Ward C was officially listed as inactive, pending demolition or repurpose in facility records dated March 19, 2017. On June 4, 2021, over 4 years later, I conducted a routine audit of archived patient records in preparation for an upcoming state inspection. The audit required me to verify that digital records matched physical documentation for all admissions and discharges spanning a 7-year period. I accessed the facility's centralized database and began cross-referencing entries. Everything appeared consistent until I reached the Ward C archive. The database showed continuous activity. Patient admissions, medication logs, progress notes, dietary records, incident reports, therapy session summaries, all dated after March 19, 2017. I opened a file at random. Patient record, Ward C, Room 09, admission date 04/12/2017. The file was comprehensive. Initial assessment, treatment plan, daily nursing notes, physician orders. The admission occurred 3 weeks after Ward C had been officially closed. I cross-referenced the patient's name, David Collier, with the facility's master admission registry. No record. David Collier had never been officially admitted to Wellspring Behavioral Health Center. Yet his chart contained 47 days of detailed documentation, authored by multiple staff members describing a standard course of psychiatric treatment. I pulled another file. Patient record, Ward C, Room 14, admission date 11/03/2018. Same pattern, detailed records, no corresponding entry in the master registry. I queried the database for all Ward C records dated after March 19, 2017. 73 patient files appeared, all documented admissions, treatment, and discharges from Ward C, a unit that had been closed and sealed for over 4 years. I checked the authorship metadata on the nursing notes. The entries were attributed to staff members I recognized, nurses, psychiatric technicians, and unit clerks who had worked on Ward C before its closure. I cross-referenced their employment records. 3 had resigned within months of the closure. 2 had transferred to other facilities. 1 had retired. None had worked at Wellspring after mid-2017. Yet the database showed continuous entries authored by them, extending into 2018, 2019, and beyond. I contacted our IT director, Stephen Lang, and requested an immediate system audit. He arrived at my office within an hour. I showed him the files. He reviewed the metadata, checked server logs, and ran a database integrity scan. "There's no corruption," he said. "These records are intact. They were entered in real time, not backdated." "That's impossible. Ward C has been closed since March 2017. He opened the access logs. According to this, Ward C badge readers have been active continuously. Daily entries. Multiple staff IDs. The badge readers were deactivated. He scrolled through the log. They're showing as operational. Staff access recorded every day, multiple times per shift. I stood and walked to the window. Pull the surveillance footage. From Ward C? Yes. He hesitated. The cameras were supposed to be deactivated. Pull the footage anyway. Stephen accessed the surveillance archive. Ward C had 6 cameras, 1 covering the main corridor, 1 at the nurses' station, and 4 positioned in high-traffic patient areas. He cued footage from April 15, 2017, 1 month after closure. The feed loaded. The nurse's station was occupied. A woman in navy scrubs sat behind the desk, reviewing paperwork. A second staff member, male, wearing a psychiatric technician uniform, stood nearby, restocking a medication card. The timestamp in the corner read 04/15/2017, 14/22/07. I recognized the woman immediately. Her name was Ellen Marsh. She had worked as a charge nurse on Ward C for 6 years, before resigning in April 2017. Stephen paused the footage. That's Ellen. I know. She resigned 4 years ago. I nodded. He resumed playback. The footage showed standard unit operations, nurses conducting rounds, patients moving between rooms in the day area, meals delivered, therapy sessions held in the group room. The activity appeared entirely routine. Stephen switched cameras. The main corridor showed a patient being escorted by 2 staff members. The patient was calm, cooperative. The staff members checked their clipboards, unlocked a room, and guided the patient inside. This looks like normal operations, Stephen said. It shouldn't exist. Ward C was empty. He switched to a different date, September 9th, 2018. The footage showed the same level of activity. Staff conducting medication rounds, patients attending group sessions, a physician entering the unit, speaking with nursing staff, reviewing charts. I recognized the physician. Dr. Alan Voss, a psychiatrist who had left Wellspring in late 2017 to join a private practice. That's Alan, I said. Stephen zoomed in. The figure on camera wore an ID badge. Dr. Alan Voss, MD, attending psychiatrist. He left the facility in October 2017, I said. This footage is from September 2018. Stephen didn't respond. He switched to live footage. The timestamp read 06/04/2021, 16:47:33. The nurse's station was occupied. A woman in navy scrubs sat behind the desk, typing on a computer. A male psychiatric technician stood beside her, reviewing a patient chart. The woman's face was partially visible. I leaned closer to the monitor. It was me, not someone similar, not a resemblance, my exact face, my posture, my mannerisms. Stephen paused the footage. Catherine? I didn't move. He zoomed in. The figure on camera wore an ID badge. Dr. Catherine Briggs, psychiatric administrator. But I was standing in my office on the 2nd floor. I hadn't entered Ward C in over 4 years. Stephen checked the access log. 16:35/12, badge 4401, entry, Ward C main entrance, my badge number. I unclipped my badge from my jacket and held it up. Number 4401. Stephen switched cameras. The corridor footage showed the figure, me, walking down the hallway, pausing to speak with a patient, then entering the nurse's station. The patient greeted the figure by name. Good afternoon, Dr. Briggs. The figure responded, though the camera had no audio. The patient nodded and continued down the corridor. Stephen fast-forwarded. At 17:08, the figure exited the nurse's station, walked down the corridor, and exited Ward C through the main door. He pulled up the access log. 17:08:54, badge 4401, exit, Ward C main entrance. I checked the time on my phone. 16:51. I had been in my office continuously since 2 p.m. Stephen and I left my office and walked to the 3rd floor where Ward C was located. The entrance was a reinforced steel door marked Authorized Personnel Only, Unit Inactive. A physical padlock secured the handle. Dust covered the frame. The badge reader beside the door was dark, no indicator lights. Stephen swiped his badge. Nothing happened. The reader was deactivated. I swiped mine. The indicator light turned green. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Stephen stared. That's not possible. I pushed the door open. The corridor beyond was lit. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and industrial cleaning solution. The nurse's station was visible at the far end, desk lamp on, computer monitor glowing. We stepped inside. The hallway was quiet but clearly active. Patient room doors were closed, small observation windows showing dimly lit interiors. A medication cart sat parked beside room 11. Clipboards hung on the wall, filled with handwritten notes. Stephen walked to the nurse's station. A half-finished cup of coffee sat beside the keyboard. The computer screen displayed an active patient chart. Ward C, room 09, David Collier, current status, stable. I checked the medication cart. It was fully stocked. The inventory log was dated June 4th, 2021. Today. I walked down the corridor and looked through the observation window of room 9. A man sat on the bed reading a book. He looked up, saw me, and waved. I stepped back. Stephen appeared beside me. Catherine, someone's in there. I know. We checked room 11. Occupied. Room 14. Occupied. Every room along the corridor showed signs of current patient activity. I returned to the nurse's station and pulled up the patient roster on the computer. 16 patients listed, names, ages, admission dates, diagnoses, all documented with the same level of detail as any active ward. Stephen checked the staff schedule posted on the wall. 4 nurses, 2 psychiatric technicians, 1 unit clerk. My name appeared at the top. Dr. Catherine Briggs, administrator, unit oversight. I hadn't worked a clinical unit in 8 years. Stephen pulled out his phone and called security. We need someone on the 3rd floor immediately, Ward C. The security officer arrived within minutes. His name was Marcus Cole. He stepped through the door, looked around, and froze. Ward C is closed, he said. Look around, I replied. He walked the corridor slowly, checking rooms, the day area, the nurse's station. He returned 5 minutes later, pale. This unit is active, fully operational. How is this possible? I didn't answer. We reviewed the footage together on the nurse's station computer. The archive showed continuous operation dating back to April 2017, 1 month after official closure. Every day, staff arrived, conducted rounds, provided patient care, documented treatment, and departed. Every night, the unit settled into a quiet routine. Patients sleeping, nurses monitoring, occasional checks. No interruptions, no gaps, no indication that Ward C had ever been closed. I pulled up footage from March 19th, 2017. The official closure date. The recording showed the final security sweep. 2 officers walking the corridor, checking rooms, confirming the unit was empty. I was visible in the footage, observing, taking notes. At 17:23, the officers exited. I followed. The door closed. The lock engaged. The timestamp advanced. 17:24, 17:25, 17:26. At 17:31, the door opened. A nurse entered, Ellen Marsh. She walked to the nurse's station, logged into the computer, and began preparing for the evening shift. At 17:45, a patient was escorted in by 2 psychiatric technicians. The patient was admitted to room 9. Documentation was completed. Medication was administered. Ward C resumed operations 37 minutes after being officially closed. Stephen and I stood in the corridor watching the live feed on a tablet. The figure identified as me walked down the hallway, clipboard in hand, speaking with patients. I touched my own arm. Solid. Present. I looked at the screen. The figure on camera moved independently, conducting tasks I wasn't performing. Stephen's phone rang. It was the front desk. Dr. Briggs, I have a message for you. Dr. Alan Voss called. He asked if you received the consultation request he submitted regarding a Ward C patient. Stephen ended the call and looked at me. Alan left the facility 4 years ago, I said. Stephen didn't respond. We exited Ward C. I locked the door manually using the padlock. The badge reader went dark. We returned to my office. I pulled up the surveillance feed on my computer. Ward C was still active. Nurses conducting rounds, patients attending group therapy. The figure identified as me reviewing charts at the nurses' station. I checked the access log. 181407, badge 4401, entry on Ward C main entrance. I was sitting at my desk. Stephen left without another word. I submitted a formal report to the board of directors attaching all footage, access logs, and patient records. The report was acknowledged but never addressed. Ward C remains listed as inactive in all official facility documentation, but the surveillance archive continues recording. The patient files continue updating. And every afternoon at 17:31 the door unlocks and the evening shift begins. I haven't returned to Ward C since June 4th, but the access log shows I enter every day. And somewhere on the 3rd floor a version of me is still conducting unit oversight, reviewing charts and ensuring continuity of care for patients who were never officially admitted. The staff working there seem content. The patients are stable. The operations are seamless. And I've learned that some closures are procedural, not permanent. Some wards continue running long after the last official discharge, staffed by people who don't remember leaving, treating patients who never arrived. Story 7. The Night Monitor. The EEG waveforms displayed on my monitor showed normal stage 2 sleep, slow, regular theta waves. But at 2:33 a.m., patient 7's brainwave pattern synchronized perfectly with mine. The amplitude, frequency, and phase alignment were identical. I was monitoring the recording from the control room, fully awake. Then I noticed the video feed. It showed me standing beside patient 7's bed, motionless, eyes closed. I was in 2 places simultaneously. The system logged the session as supervised and compliant. My name is Thomas Wren, and I worked as a sleep study technician at Wellspring Behavioral Health Center for 5 years. The facility operated a small sleep disorders clinic on the 1st floor, primarily serving patients with comorbid psychiatric and sleep-related conditions. Insomnia, parasomnias, sleep phase disorders, and REM behavior disturbances. My responsibilities included preparing patients for overnight polysomnography, monitoring EEG and physiological data in real time, and documenting sleep architecture throughout the recording period. The work was solitary and methodical. Most nights I sat alone in the control room, a small, dimly lit space lined with monitors, while patients slept in adjacent observation rooms. I watched brain waves scroll across screens, listened to the rhythmic beep of pulse oximeters, and annotated sleep stages in detailed logs. On June 18th, a patient was scheduled for a full overnight sleep study. The referral came from Dr. Evelyn Marsh, who noted that the patient, admitted under the identifier patient 7 due to confidentiality protocols, exhibited severe dissociative symptoms alongside profound insomnia. The study aimed to assess whether underlying sleep pathology contributed to the dissociative episodes. Patient 7 arrived at the clinic at 9 p.m. He was a man in his late 30s, calm, cooperative, and notably silent. He followed instructions without question, allowing me to apply the standard array of sensors: EEG electrodes on the scalp, EOG sensors near the eyes, EMG leads on the chin and legs, respiratory belts around the chest and abdomen, and a pulse oximeter on the finger. Once prepared, I guided him to observation room 3, a small, comfortable space with a hospital bed, blackout curtains, and a ceiling-mounted infrared camera. I explained that I would monitor him throughout the night from the adjacent control room and that he should try to sleep as naturally as possible. He nodded once and lay down without speaking. I returned to the control room, activated the recording system, and began monitoring. The EEG channels displayed waking alpha rhythms, expected for a patient lying quietly but not yet asleep. His heart rate was 64 beats per minute. Respiration, 12 breaths per minute. All parameters normal. At 10:47 p.m., the EEG transitioned to stage 1 sleep, slower theta waves emerging, alpha activity fading. Patient 7 had fallen asleep. By 11:23 p.m., he entered stage 2 sleep. Sleep spindles and K complexes visible on the EEG. His body relaxed. Eye movement ceased. I annotated the log. Stage 2 sleep onset, 23:23, physiologically normal. The night proceeded routinely. Patient 7 cycled through normal sleep stages, no apneas, no limb movements, no unusual wakefulness. His sleep architecture appeared unremarkable. At 2:33 a.m., I noticed a change. The EEG waveform on monitor 5, dedicated to patient 7's central cortex, began displaying a distinctive pattern. The frequency stabilized at exactly 7.4 Hz, the amplitude at 42 microvolts. The waveform was smooth, rhythmic, consistent. I glanced at the adjacent monitor, which displayed my own EEG feed. Standard protocol required that sleep technicians wear a single-channel EEG headset during overnight shifts, primarily for research purposes, monitoring technician alertness and comparing waking versus sleeping brain states. The data was logged but rarely reviewed. My waveform matched patient 7's exactly. Same frequency, same amplitude, same phase alignment. I blinked and leaned closer to the screen. The synchronization persisted. As patient 7's waveform oscillated, mine followed in perfect unison. Every peak, every trough, every subtle fluctuation mirrored precisely. I was awake, seated upright, actively monitoring, but my brain activity was identical to a sleeping patient's. I checked the equipment. All connections secure, no cross-channel interference, no technical errors. I pulled up the video feed from observation room 3. Patient 7 lay on his back, motionless, eyes closed, chest rising and falling slowly. The timestamp in the corner read 02:33:47 a.m. I switched to the control room's internal camera, a small security feed that recorded the technician's workspace for quality assurance purposes. The feed showed the control room from an elevated angle. My chair was visible. The monitors glowed softly in the dim light, but I was not seated at the desk. I was standing in the doorway connecting the control room to observation room 3. I stared at the screen. The figure, me, stood motionless, arms at my sides, head tilted slightly forward. My eyes were closed. I looked down at myself. I was seated at the desk, hands resting on the keyboard. I looked back at the monitor. The figure in the doorway remained still. I stood slowly and turned toward the doorway. It was empty. I checked the video feed again. The figure was still visible, standing in the doorway, facing into observation room 3. I rewound the footage 30 seconds. At 2:33 and 19 seconds, I was seated at the desk, reviewing data. At 2:33 and 21 seconds, I stood and walked toward the doorway. At 2:33 and 24 seconds, I stopped in the threshold, facing the observation room. I had no memory of standing, no memory of walking to the doorway. I checked my own EEG monitor. The waveform continued matching patient 7's. 7.4 Hz, 42 microvolts, stage 2 sleep. I was awake. I returned my attention to the video feed. The figure in the doorway stepped forward, crossing into observation room 3. It walked slowly to the side of patient 7's bed and stopped. I switched to the observation room camera. The figure stood beside the bed, facing patient 7. Its posture was relaxed. Its eyes remained closed. Patient 7's eyes opened. He turned his head slowly, looking directly at the figure. Neither moved. The EEG waveforms remained synchronized. I stood again and walked to the doorway. I looked into observation room 3. Patient 7 lay on the bed, eyes closed, sleeping soundly. No one else was present. I returned to the control room and reviewed the footage. The figure remained beside the bed. Patient 7's eyes were open, fixed on the figure. At 2:35 and 12 seconds, patient 7 closed his eyes. The figure turned, walked back to the doorway, and stopped at the threshold. The EEG synchronization broke. My waveform returned to waking beta rhythms. Fast, irregular, alert. Patient 7's waveform remained in stage 2 sleep. I checked the control room camera feed. The figure was gone. I was seated at the desk. I reviewed the video timestamp. No gaps, no loops. The recording was continuous. At 2:36 a.m., I documented the event in the session log. Anomalous EEG synchronization observed between technician and patient. Duration approximately 2 minutes. Physiological cause unclear. Patient remained asleep throughout. No clinical intervention required. The rest of the night passed without incident. Patient 7 completed a full sleep cycle, waking naturally at 6:41 a.m. I removed the sensors, provided a brief post-study questionnaire, and escorted him to the waiting area. Dr. Marsh reviewed the study results that afternoon. She noted the EEG synchronization event and requested a follow-up consultation. "Did you fall asleep during the monitoring period?" she asked. "No. I was awake the entire time. Your EEG shows clear stage 2 sleep activity during the synchronization window." "I know. But I was awake." She reviewed the video footage. "You're standing beside the patient's bed. I was seated in the control room." She paused the video, zooming in on the figure beside the bed. "That's you." "I don't remember leaving my chair." She closed the laptop. "We'll schedule another study. I want to replicate the conditions." On June 25th, patient 7 returned for a second overnight study. Same protocol, same sensors, same observation room. I monitored from the control room. At 2:33 a.m., the EEG synchronization occurred again. I checked the video feed immediately. The figure was already standing in the doorway. I did not move from my chair. I watched the monitor continuously. The figure entered observation room 3, approached the bed, and stood motionless beside patient 7. Patient 7 opened his eyes and looked at the figure. I checked my own EEG. Perfect synchronization. I stood and walked to the doorway. Observation room 3 was empty except for patient 7 sleeping soundly. I returned to the control room. The video feed showed the figure standing beside the bed. Patient 7's eyes were open. At 2:35 a.m., the synchronization ended. The figure walked back to the doorway and disappeared. Dr. Marsh reviewed the second study and ordered a third. On July 2nd, the same event occurred. Same time, same duration, same perfect EEG synchronization. Dr. Berter Marsh discontinued further studies and submitted a case report to a psychiatric neurology journal describing the phenomenon as idiopathic bilateral somnambulistic concordance, a hypothesized condition in which two individuals exhibit simultaneous sleep-related dissociative behavior with shared neurological markers. The case report was never published. Patient 7 was transferred to a different facility for long-term residential care. I continued working at the sleep clinic for 3 more months, but every night at 2:33 a.m., my EEG waveform would shift into stage 2 sleep for exactly 2 minutes, regardless of my waking state. I submitted my resignation in September. Before leaving, I reviewed archived footage from observation room 3. Every recording showed the same event. At 2:33 a.m., A figure would enter the room, stand beside the bed, and remain motionless until 2:35 a.m. The figure was always me, but I was always seated in the control room watching. The system logs each session as supervised, compliant, and physiologically normal. And somewhere in the archive, footage continues recording, night after night at 2:33 a.m., a technician who isn't there walks into a room and watches a patient who's already watching back. Story 8. Transfer footage. The patient transfer video showed a sedated individual being wheeled down the corridor on a gurney, restraints secure, vitals stable. Paramedics flanked the gurney, orderlies guided it through the exit, and dispatch confirmed a receiving hospital 30 minutes away. But when I called to verify arrival, the charge nurse insisted they'd never accepted the patient. I replayed the footage. The gurney was empty. The sheet lay flat. Only the restraints moved, tightening and loosening as if something invisible strained against them. The transfer log was signed and time-stamped by me. My name is Dr. Miles Brennan, and I completed my psychiatry residency at Wellspring Behavioral Health Center between July 2018 and June 2022. During the final year of my training, I rotated through the Acute Crisis Stabilization Unit, managing high-acuity patients requiring rapid intervention, intensive monitoring, and frequent transfers to specialized facilities. Transfers were routine but required meticulous documentation. Every patient movement, whether to a medical hospital for physical health concerns, a long-term psychiatric facility for extended care, or a state institution for forensic evaluation, was recorded through written orders, signed consents, detailed transfer summaries, and video documentation captured by hallway security cameras. On April 9, 2022, I authorized the transfer of a patient admitted under the identifier Patient 12. The patient had been brought in by law enforcement following a severe dissociative crisis and exhibited symptoms consistent with acute catatonia, mutism, immobility, waxy flexibility, and profound withdrawal. After 72 hours of observation and unsuccessful pharmacological intervention, I consulted with the attending psychiatrist, Dr. Alan Voss, who recommended transfer to Crescent Valley Psychiatric Institute, a specialized facility approximately 30 miles north with expertise in treatment-resistant catatonic states. I completed the transfer paperwork on April 9th at 3:15 p.m. The receiving facility confirmed bed availability. Ambulance dispatch was notified. Transport was scheduled for 4:30 p.m. At 4:22 p.m., I conducted a final bedside assessment. Patient 12 lay motionless on a gurney in evaluation room 6, secured with soft restraints at the wrists and ankles, a safety strap across the chest. Vital signs were stable. Heart rate 71, blood pressure 118/76, oxygen saturation 98%. The patient showed no response to verbal stimuli, no eye contact, no voluntary movement. I documented the assessment in the transfer summary and signed the authorization form. At 4:29 p.m., 2 paramedics arrived, uniformed, credentialed, professional. I provided them with the transfer packet, medical summary, medication list, legal hold documentation, and receiving facility contact information. They confirmed the patient's identity using the wristband, reviewed the restraints, and prepared for transport. I accompanied them to the hallway. 2 hospital orderlies assisted, guiding the gurney through the corridor toward the east exit where the ambulance was staged. Security cameras recorded the entire sequence. Camera 8 covered the corridor outside evaluation room 6. Camera 11 covered the main hallway intersection. Camera 14 covered the east exit vestibule. The transfer proceeded without incident. The gurney moved smoothly. The patient remained motionless, eyes closed, body relaxed under sedation. The paramedics maintained standard positioning, one at the head, one at the foot. The orderlies walked alongside. At 4:36 p.m., the gurney passed through the east exit. The ambulance doors closed. The vehicle departed. I returned to the nurses' station and documented the transfer in the electronic medical record. Patient 12 transferred to Crescent Valley Psychiatric Institute. Transport completed without complication. ETA 1715, receiving facility notified. I moved on to other responsibilities. At 5:43 p.m., I received a phone call from the charge nurse at Crescent Valley. Dr. Brennan, this is Diane Frost at Crescent Valley. I'm calling about the patient transfer you sent this afternoon. Yes, patient 12. Did they arrive safely? A pause. Dr. Brennan, we didn't receive a patient transfer today. I pulled up the medical record. The ambulance left Wellspring at 4:36 p.m. ETA was 5:15. The patient should have arrived nearly 30 minutes ago. I'm showing no incoming transports scheduled for today. I've checked with our admissions office and security. No one arrived. I contacted dispatch. The operator confirmed that Ambulance Unit 47 had been assigned to the Wellspring to Crescent Valley transfer and had logged arrival at Crescent Valley at 5:18 p.m. The unit completed the drop-off and cleared at 5:24, the operator said. The patient was signed over to receiving facility staff. I called Diane back. Dispatch confirms your facility received the patient at 5:18 p.m. Dr. Brennan, I'm standing in our admissions area right now. No patient arrived. No ambulance came through our entrance. I've reviewed our security footage. No transport activity this afternoon. I thanked her and ended the call. I walked to the security office and requested footage from the east exit. The officer on duty, Marcus Cole, cued the recording and played it on the monitor. At 4:36 p.m., the gurney emerged from the building, guided by the two orderlies. The paramedics opened the ambulance rear doors. The gurney was loaded, the doors closed. The vehicle drove away. I asked Marcus to zoom in on the gurney. The footage was clear. The patient lay motionless, covered with a white sheet up to the chest, face visible in profile, eyes closed. Standard transfer, Marcus said. Everything looks normal. I returned to my office and called Crescent Valley a third time. Diane confirmed again that no patient had arrived. I requested that Marcus pull the footage and export it for review. He provided me with a digital copy on a USB drive. I returned to my office and reviewed the footage frame by frame on my computer. The sequence was identical to what I'd seen in the security office. The gurney exited the building. The patient was loaded into the ambulance. The vehicle departed. I paused the footage at 4:36 and 41 seconds, zooming in on the gurney as it passed under the exterior light above the exit. The patient's face was clearly visible, eyes closed, head tilted slightly to the right, features consistent with patient 12. I advanced the footage frame by frame. The orderlies lifted the gurney into the ambulance. One paramedic secured the gurney's locking mechanism. The other paramedic adjusted the IV line, though no IV had been ordered. I paused and rewound. At 4:36 and 53 seconds, a paramedic's hand reached toward the gurney. At 4:36 and 54 seconds, the hand grasped an IV line hanging from a pole attached to the gurney. No IV pole had been present when the gurney left Evaluation Room 6. I reviewed the interior footage from the corridor. At 4:32 p.m., the gurney passed camera 11. No IV pole, no IV line. At 4:36 p.m., as the gurney exited the building, an IV pole was visible. I zoomed in on the patient's face again. The features were identical. Same profile, same positioning. But something was wrong. The sheet covering the patient's body lay flat, not draped over a torso. Flat, as if covering an empty gurney. I advanced frame by frame. At 4:37 and 6 seconds, the gurney was fully inside the ambulance. The paramedics adjusted the restraints, wrist cuffs tightening, ankle straps securing. But the sheet remained flat. I zoomed in on the restraints. The wrist cuffs tightened visibly, fabric pulling taut as if restraining something. But beneath the sheet, no body shape was visible. I reviewed the footage a third time, focusing on the patient's face. The face was present, visible, consistent throughout the loading sequence. But the body beneath the sheet was absent. I called Marcus and asked him to review the footage with me. He arrived at my office 10 minutes later. I played the clip. He watched silently. "Do you see anything unusual?" I asked. He leaned closer. The IV pole wasn't there before. "Anything else?" He watched the sequence twice more. "The sheet looks flat." I paused on a frame showing the gurney inside the ambulance. "Where's the patient's body?" Marcus stared. "The face is there, but yeah, the sheet's flat." I rewound to the interior corridor footage. At 4:31 p.m., the gurney passed camera 8 just outside evaluation room 6. The patient was clearly visible, body shape evident beneath the sheet, chest rising and falling with slow respiration. At 4:36 p.m., the gurney passed through the exit. The face remained visible. The body was gone. Marcus reviewed the corridor footage independently. "This doesn't make sense. The patient's there at 4:31, gone at 4:36, but the gurney never stopped. No one touched the sheet." I contacted Crescent Valley again and requested that Diane review her security footage personally, focusing on the main entrance and ambulance bay. She called back 20 minutes later. "Dr. Brennan, I've reviewed every camera angle. No ambulance arrived, no activity at our entrance between 4 and 6 p.m. Dispatch logged the unit's arrival at 5:18. I believe dispatch, but there's no visual evidence." I thanked her and ended the call. I reviewed the transfer documentation. The receiving facility's signature line was blank, standard as signatures were collected upon arrival. But the transport authorization form, which I had signed at 3:15 p.m., showed an additional signature at the bottom. Patient received by Crescent Valley Psychiatric Institute, 1718. D. Frost, RN. Diane Frost. The charge nurse I'd been speaking with. I called Diane. "Did you sign a receiving document this afternoon?" "No. I told you, no patient arrived." "There's a signature on the transport form. It's attributed to you, time-stamped at 5:18 p.m. Silence. Then, "I didn't sign anything." I scanned the form and emailed it to her. She called back within minutes. "That's my signature, but I didn't write it. I haven't signed any transfer paperwork today." I returned to the security footage and reviewed the ambulance departure one final time. At 4:37 and 18 seconds, the ambulance doors closed. Inside, visible through the rear window, the gurney remained secured. The restraints were taut. The sheet lay flat. The patient's face was still visible, positioned unnaturally above the empty gurney, as if suspended. At 4:37 and 21 seconds, the face turned. The eyes opened. The head tilted forward, looking directly at the camera. I paused the footage. The patient's eyes were open, alert, focused. At 4:37 and 23 seconds, the lips moved. No audio, but the motion was clear. I zoomed in and analyzed the movement frame by frame. The lips formed two words: "I'm ready." At 4:37 and 25 seconds, the ambulance pulled away from the curb and exited the frame. I checked dispatch logs. The unit arrived at Crescent Valley at 5:18 p.m., completed the transfer, and cleared at 5:24 p.m. But Crescent Valley had no record of the patient's arrival. I contacted the ambulance company directly and requested a report from the paramedics assigned to Unit 47. The company's operations manager called me the following morning. Dr. Brennan, I've reviewed the unit's trip log. Unit 47 completed a Wellspring to Crescent Valley transport yesterday, arriving at 5:18 p.m. The patient was signed over to receiving facility staff without incident. Who signed for the patient? The log shows a nurse named D. Frost. She denies receiving the patient. A pause. Our paramedics documented the transfer as complete. The patient was wheeled into the facility and handed off. Can I speak with the paramedics? They're off duty, but I can have them call you. Neither paramedic returned my call. On April 11th, I reviewed patient 12's medical record. The file was marked transfer complete. Patient discharged to Crescent Valley Psychiatric Institute on 04/09/2022. But Crescent Valley had no record of admission. I submitted a missing patient report to facility administration. An internal investigation was initiated. Security footage was reviewed. Dispatch logs were audited. The ambulance company was contacted. The investigation concluded with a finding of documentation discrepancy. No evidence of patient harm or foul play. Patient 12 was officially listed as transferred and discharged. No further action was taken. I completed my residency in June and accepted a position at a different facility. Before leaving Wellspring, I reviewed the security footage one last time. At 4:37 and 23 seconds, the patient's lips moved. I'm ready. At 4:37 and 25 seconds, the ambulance departed. I checked the transfer log. My signature appeared at the bottom, authorizing the transfer. Beside it, a second signature, patient 12, self-discharged, 17/18. The signature was in my handwriting. I have no memory of writing it, but somewhere in footage that continues to exist, a patient with no body was wheeled into an ambulance, transferred to a facility that never received them, and signed out by a nurse who wasn't there. And every transfer since, I checked the gurney twice. Once for the patient and once to make sure the restraints aren't moving on their own. Story 9. The observation room reversal. I reviewed the overnight observation footage from room 7 as part of my shift report. The recording showed me seated behind the one-way glass, monitoring a high-risk patient for 6 continuous hours. Standard protocol. But when I advanced the playback to review a specific incident, the positions reversed. I was seated inside the observation room. Patient gown draped over my shoulders, hands folded in my lap. The patient sat behind the glass, writing detailed behavioral notes in my handwriting. The footage was unedited. The timestamps were continuous. The reversal occurred at 3:41 a.m., exactly when I documented the patient's final check as stable and asleep. My name is Hannah Wilder, and I worked as a behavioral health nurse at Wellspring Behavioral Health Center for 7 years. My primary assignment was the Acute Observation Unit, a specialized area designed for continuous monitoring of patients exhibiting severe psychiatric crises, self-harm risk, or acute psychosis. The unit contained 6 observation rooms, each equipped with reinforced safety features, minimal furnishings, and a one-way observation window connected to a monitoring station. The monitoring station was a small adjacent room where staff could observe patients continuously without being seen. The one-way glass allowed clear visibility into the patient room while maintaining privacy for the observer. Each station contained a desk, a chair, documentation materials, and a direct communication system. On May 17th, a patient was admitted to Observation Room 7 under a psychiatric hold following a suicide attempt. The patient, a woman in her mid-30s identified as Rachel Dorn, was assessed as high risk and placed on continuous one-to-one observation, meaning a staff member was required to maintain direct visual contact at all times. I was assigned to Rachel's observation shift from midnight to 6 a.m. At 11:54 p.m., I entered the monitoring station adjacent to room 7. I reviewed Rachel's chart, noting her admission history, current medications, and behavioral precautions. She had been sedated lightly but remained conscious. Her affect was flat, speech minimal, and cooperation marginal. I positioned myself at the desk, facing the one-way window. Rachel sat on the floor in the corner of the observation room, back against the padded wall, knees drawn to her chest. She stared at the floor, motionless. I documented her status at midnight. Patient remains seated in corner, minimal movement, eyes open, no verbal output, appears internally preoccupied. The first 3 hours passed without significant change. Rachel shifted positions occasionally but remained in the corner. She did not speak. She did not make eye contact with the window, though she couldn't see through it from her side. At 3:27 a.m., she stood slowly and walked to the center of the room. She stopped, facing the one-way window, and tilted her head slightly. I documented. Patient standing. Facing observation window, no apparent distress. Monitoring continues. She remained standing, staring directly at the window, directly at me, though she couldn't see me. At 3:34 a.m., she raised her right hand and pointed at the glass. I noted patient gesturing toward window, no verbal communication, behavior calm, but unusual. At 3:38 a.m., she walked forward and pressed her palm flat against the glass. Her hand remained there for 43 seconds. Then she returned to the corner and sat down. I documented. Patient approached window, made physical contact, returned to seated position, no signs of agitation. At 3:41 a.m., Rachel closed her eyes. I documented. Patient appears to be resting, eyes closed, breathing regular, stable. I continued observing for the remainder of the shift. Rachel did not move again. At 6 a.m., the day shift nurse arrived to relieve me. I provided a verbal report and submitted my written documentation. At 9:30 a.m., after completing my shift and returning home, I received a call from the unit supervisor, Martin Cross. "Hannah, we need you to review last night's observation footage." "Is there a problem?" "Just review it. I'll send you the secure link." I accessed the footage from my personal laptop via the facility's encrypted portal. The recording began at midnight, showing the interior of Observation Room 7 from the ceiling-mounted camera. Rachel sat in the corner, motionless. The timestamp advanced. 3 hours passed. At 3:27 a.m., Rachel stood and walked to the center of the room. The footage matched my recollection exactly. At 3:34 a.m., she pointed at the observation window. At 3:38 a.m., she approached the window and pressed her palm against the glass. At 3:41 a.m., she returned to the corner and closed her eyes. I continued watching. The recording showed Rachel remaining seated, eyes closed for the rest of the shift. At 6 a.m., the day shift nurse entered to conduct a welfare check. Rachel opened her eyes and responded appropriately. The footage was consistent with my documentation. I called Martin. "I reviewed the footage. Everything looks accurate. Keep watching. Go to timestamp 0341. I returned to the recording and advanced to 3:41 a.m. Rachel closed her eyes. The camera angle shifted. Not suddenly. Not with a noticeable edit. The framing simply changed, as if the camera had been repositioned. The new angle showed the observation room from a different perspective. From inside the monitoring station, looking through the one-way window into the patient room. Rachel sat in the corner, eyes closed. Behind the window, visible in the monitoring station, a figure sat at the desk. I zoomed in. The figure was me. I was seated in the chair, facing the window, hands resting on the desk, observing Rachel. The footage showed what I had experienced, me observing the patient from the monitoring station. I advanced the recording, At 3:43 a.m., Rachel opened her eyes and stood. She walked to the window and stared directly at it. The camera angle shifted again. This time it showed the interior of the monitoring station. I was no longer seated at the desk. The chair was empty. The camera panned slightly, a smooth, deliberate movement, and focused on the one-way window. Through the glass, Rachel sat at the desk in the monitoring station. She wore my uniform. My ID badge hung from her lanyard. She held my pen, writing steadily in my documentation log. I paused the recording. I checked the timestamp, 03:43:12 a.m. I had been seated in the monitoring station at that time. I had documented Rachel's behavior. I had not left the room. I resumed playback. The camera angle shifted again, now showing the interior of Observation Room 7 from the ceiling mount. I was seated in the corner wearing a patient gown. My hands were folded in my lap. My eyes were closed. Rachel sat behind the glass in the monitoring station writing notes. At 3:47 a.m. the figure in the observation room, opened my eyes and stood. I walked to the window and pressed my palm against the glass. Rachel, seated in the monitoring station, looked up from the documentation log and made a note. At 3:51 a.m. I returned to the corner and sat down. The camera angle shifted again, returning to the standard ceiling-mounted view of the observation room. Rachel sat in the corner, eyes closed. The monitoring station was visible through the open door. Empty chair, desk lamp on, documentation log open. The recording continued without further changes. At 6 a.m., the day shift nurse entered and conducted the welfare check. I called Martin immediately. "What is this?" I asked. "We don't know. The footage is unedited, no breaks, no splices, the timestamps are continuous." I was in the monitoring station the entire shift. I never entered the observation room. Your documentation matches the timeline. Your badge log confirms you remained in the monitoring station from midnight to 6 a.m. Then how do you explain the footage? He didn't answer. I returned to the facility that afternoon and requested access to the observation room and monitoring station. Martin accompanied me. We entered the monitoring station. The desk, chair, and window were exactly as I remembered. I sat in the chair and looked through the one-way glass into Observation Room 7. The room was empty, staged for the next admission. Clean floors, bare walls, no furniture except a floor mat. Martin checked the camera. Functioning normally, no evidence of tampering. I reviewed the documentation log I had completed during the shift. Every entry was in my handwriting. Every timestamp was accurate. Every observation matched what I remembered. Martin pulled up the footage on his tablet and played it again. At 3:41 a.m., the reversal occurred. I appeared in the observation room. Rachel appeared in the monitoring station. "Have you experienced any memory gaps recently?" Martin asked. "No." "Any dissociative episodes, confusion, lost time?" "No. I remember the entire shift clearly." He made a note. "We're recommending a medical evaluation." I underwent the evaluation the following day. Cognitive function tests, neurological scans, psychological assessments, all returned normal. On May 20th, I was cleared to return to work. I was assigned to a different unit. On May 23rd, Rachel Dorn was discharged from Wellspring following successful stabilization. Her treatment team noted significant improvement and cooperative engagement throughout her stay. I reviewed her chart before she left. Under the section labeled Notable Behavioral Observations, a single entry appeared. Patient exhibited appropriate understanding of observation protocols and expressed gratitude for attentive nursing staff, particularly night shift personnel. Demonstrated insight into her condition and reflected positively on therapeutic monitoring experience. Discharge plan includes outpatient follow-up and continued medication management. Beneath the entry, a handwritten note appeared in the margin. Patient demonstrated unusual familiarity with observation procedures and staff documentation practices. Queried about this during discharge interview. Patient stated, "I watched someone very carefully. I learned how to write it all down correctly." The note was signed, H. Wilder, RN. I had not written it. I contacted Martin and showed him the entry. He reviewed the chart and confirmed the handwriting matched mine. "When did you write this?" he asked. "I didn't." He checked the electronic timestamp. The note was entered on May 19th at 3:41 a.m. I had not been at the facility on May 19th. I was on scheduled leave following the medical evaluation. Martin pulled the security footage from May 19th. At 3:41 a.m., the monitoring station adjacent to Observation Room 7 was occupied. A figure sat at the desk writing in a documentation log. The figure wore my uniform, my ID badge, my posture. The camera angle shifted, showing the observation room. Rachel Dorn sat in the corner, eyes closed, hands folded. The footage continued for 18 minutes. At 3:59 a.m., the figure in the monitoring station stood, gathered the documentation log, and exited. The badge access log showed no entry for my badge on May 19th, but the footage clearly showed me conducting an observation shift. Martin closed the tablet. "Hannah, you need to take extended leave." "I didn't write that note. I wasn't there." "The footage shows otherwise." I left Wellspring on May 25th and did not return. Before I left, I reviewed the observation footage one final time. At 3:41 a.m., the reversal occurred. I sat in the observation room, patient gown over my shoulders, hands folded. Rachel sat in the monitoring station, writing notes in my handwriting. At 3:43 a.m., I stood and walked to the window. I pressed my palm against the glass and looked at Rachel. She looked up from the documentation log and met my gaze. On the recording, our eyes locked. For 6 seconds, we stared at each other through the one-way glass. Then the camera angle shifted and the room was empty. I submitted my resignation in June, but every night at 3:41 a.m., footage continues recording in Observation Room 7. And sometimes the person behind the glass isn't the patient. Sometimes the person writing notes isn't the nurse. And sometimes you can't tell which side of the window you're really on until the camera shifts and shows you sitting in a corner wearing the wrong clothes, wondering when the observation started. Story 10. Audio without video. Camera 19 stopped transmitting video at 1:53 a.m. The feed went black, but the audio channel remained active. I heard calm breathing, soft footsteps pacing a small space, whispered reports spoken in measured tones. The voice was mine. Same cadence, same phrasing, same regional accent. But the room camera 19 monitored didn't exist on any floor plan. And when I checked the facility's audio archive 3 days later, the final recorded phrase was, "End of shift acknowledged," spoken at 6:02 a.m., 4 minutes after I'd already clocked out and left the building. My name is Samuel Carver, and I worked as a facilities audio technician at Wellspring Behavioral Health Center for 9 years. My role involved maintaining the facility's audio infrastructure, intercom systems, emergency broadcast equipment, patient communication devices, and audio feeds integrated with the surveillance camera network. Most of my work was preventive, testing speaker output, replacing microphones, updating firmware, and responding to maintenance requests. The facility's surveillance system included 47 cameras, 31 of which were equipped with audio recording capability. Audio was captured selectively, primarily in common areas, nurses' stations, and interview rooms where documentation of verbal interactions was required. Patient rooms typically did not have audio recording due to privacy regulations. On June 26th, I received a maintenance alert. Camera 19. Audio active, video signal lost. The alert appeared on my workstation monitor at 1:53 a.m. I was conducting a routine overnight systems check from my basement office, monitoring network health across the facility. I pulled up Camera 19's status panel. Video feed, no signal. Audio feed, active. I checked the camera location registry. Camera 19 was listed as Sublevel 1, Corridor J, Equipment Storage Area. I pulled up the facility map. Sublevel 1 housed mechanical systems, storage, and archived records. Corridor J was labeled as a restricted access maintenance corridor used infrequently for equipment transport. I activated the audio feed. Static for 3 seconds, then clear audio. Breathing. Slow. Regular. Calm. I adjusted the volume and listened. The breathing continued. Inhalation, exhalation, steady rhythm, no background noise, no mechanical hum, no HVAC interference. I waited. At 1:55 and 37 seconds, footsteps. Soft, measured pacing. Shoes on a hard surface, possibly concrete or tile. The steps moved in a small, repetitive pattern. Forward 6 paces, pause, turn, return 6 paces, pause, turn. The footsteps continued for 2 minutes and 18 seconds, then silence. At 1:58 a.m., a voice spoke. Checking corridor status, no activity, all doors secured, lighting functional, proceeding to next checkpoint. The voice was calm, professional, procedural. It was my voice. Not similar, not close. My exact voice. Same pitch, same inflection, same regional accent I'd grown up with in Eastern Virginia. I stopped the playback and checked the timestamp. 06:26, 01:58, 04 a.m. I was seated in my basement office. I had not left the room. I had not spoken aloud. I resumed the audio feed. At 2:01 a.m., the footsteps resumed. 6 paces forward. Pause. Turn. 6 paces back. At 2:03 a.m., the voice spoke again. Checkpoint 2 complete. Environmental controls stable. Audio systems operational. No anomalies detected. My voice. My phrasing. The kind of verbal report I might dictate during a maintenance inspection. I pulled up the badge access log and filtered by my badge number 3347. The log showed 1 entry, 2147 entry, south stairwell, basement access. I had clocked in at 9:45 p.m. and accessed the basement office at 9:47 p.m. No other entries. I checked the access log for Sublevel 1, Corridor J. No entries in the past 72 hours. I contacted the overnight security officer, Marcus Cole, via radio. Marcus, can you do a sweep of Sublevel 1, Corridor J? What's the issue? Camera 19 lost video. I'm getting audio, but I need visual confirmation of the area. On my way, I monitored the audio feed while Marcus conducted the sweep. At 2:09 a.m., his voice came through the radio. I'm at Sublevel 1. Corridor J is locked. No access since last maintenance cycle. Can you unlock it and check inside? Stand by. I heard the faint sound of a badge swipe through the audio feed, then a door unlocking. Marcus's voice came through both the radio and the Camera 19 audio feed simultaneously. Corridors clear. Equipment storage, no one here. Lights are off. But on the audio feed, I could still hear breathing. Marcus, are you sure? I'm hearing movement on the feed. I'm standing in the corridor right now. It's empty. The breathing continued, slow, regular. Marcus's voice came through the radio again. Camera 19's mounted at the far end of the corridor. The lens housing is intact, but the video cable's disconnected. That's why you're not getting a picture. Can you reconnect it? Sure. Give me a minute. I waited. At 2:12 a.m., Marcus radioed back. Cable's reconnected. Check your feed. I refreshed Camera 19's status panel. Video feed. Active. The video displayed a long, narrow corridor lined with metal shelving units holding electrical components, spare cables, and tools. The lighting was dim but functional. The corridor was empty. Marcus appeared on screen, waving at the camera. "You see me?" "Yeah. Thanks to Marcus." He exited the frame and left the corridor. The door closed behind him with a soft click audible on the audio feed. I monitored the feed. The corridor remained empty. No movement. No sound. At 2:15 a.m., the breathing resumed. I checked the video. No one was present. I increased the audio sensitivity and isolated the source. The breathing originated directly beneath the camera's microphone. I rewound the video 30 seconds. At 2:14 and 43 seconds, the corridor was empty. At 2:14 and 44 seconds, the corridor remained empty. No figures, no shadows. But the audio feed captured clear, steady breathing. At 2:17 a.m., the voice spoke. "Equipment status verified, corridor secure, returning to primary station." My voice. I watched the video. The corridor was empty. No one spoke. I contacted Marcus again. "Did you hear anyone speaking in Corridor J?" "Negative. It was silent." "You're sure?" "Positive. Why?" "I'm picking up audio that doesn't match the video." "Could be interference. Radio bleed, maybe." "Maybe." I ended the call and continued monitoring. At 2:21 a.m., the footsteps resumed. Same pattern, 6 paces forward, pause, turn, 6 paces back. The video showed an empty corridor. At 2:24 a.m., the voice spoke again. "Final checkpoint reached. All systems functional. Documentation complete. Shift concludes at 0600. I documented the audio anomaly in the maintenance log and flagged camera 19 for further review. At 6:02 a.m., as I prepared to clock out, the audio feed from camera 19 transmitted one final phrase: "End of shift acknowledged." I checked the timestamp. 06:02:17 a.m. I checked the video. The corridor was empty. I clocked out at 5:58 a.m. and left the building. The next evening, I reviewed the archived audio from camera 19. The recording began at 1:53 a.m. Breathing, footsteps, verbal reports. The final recorded phrase was "End of shift acknowledged" at 6:02 a.m. I pulled up the badge access log for June 26th. My clock-out time was listed as 5:58:32 a.m. 4 minutes before the final audio transmission, I contacted IT security and requested a full diagnostic of camera 19's audio system. The technician, Stephen Lang, reviewed the equipment on June 28th. He found no malfunctions. The microphone was functioning normally. The audio feed was clean, properly routed, and correctly time-stamped. "The equipment's fine," Stephen said. "If you're hearing audio that doesn't match the video, it's either environmental interference or a data routing error." "Can you isolate the source?" He ran additional tests and reviewed the network topology. "The audio feed is coming directly from camera 19's microphone. No external sources, no cross-channel bleed. So the sounds are originating in Corridor J." "According to the data, yes. But the corridor's empty," he shrugged. "Then the microphone's picking up residual noise. Acoustics can be weird in enclosed spaces." I thanked him and returned to my office. On June 30th, I conducted a manual inspection of Corridor J. I brought a handheld audio recorder and a flashlight. The corridor was exactly as it appeared on camera. Long, narrow, lined with storage shelves. The air was cool and still. No machinery, no ventilation noise. I stood directly beneath camera 19 and activated my recorder. I waited in silence for 5 minutes. At 2:17 p.m. I heard breathing. Not my own. Another source. Close. Directly beside me. I turned. No one was present. The breathing continued. Slow, regular, calm. I checked my recorder. It was capturing the sound. I spoke aloud. This is Samuel Carver conducting an audio test in Corridor J at 1417 on June 30th. I played back the recording. My voice was clear. But layered beneath it, almost inaudible, was another voice, whispering the same words, synchronized perfectly in my exact tone. I stopped the playback. I left the corridor and returned to my office. I submitted a detailed report to my supervisor, attaching the audio recording. The report was reviewed and a decision was made to deactivate Camera 19's audio feed. On July 2nd, the audio feed was disabled. On July 5th, I received an automated alert. Camera 19, audio active, video signal lost. I checked the system status. The audio feed had reactivated. The video feed was offline. I pulled up the live audio. Breathing, footsteps, a voice. Checking corridor status, no activity, all doors secured. My voice. I checked the video feed. Still offline. I contacted Steven. He reviewed the system remotely and confirmed that the audio feed had been manually reactivated from an administrative account. Who reactivated it? I asked. Your account. I didn't touch it. He sent me a screenshot of the access log. At 02:14 a.m. on July 5th, my credentials were used to enable Camera 19's audio feed. I had been home asleep at 2:14 a.m. Steven escalated the issue to IT security. An investigation concluded that no external breach had occurred. The reactivation was executed using valid credentials, authenticated through the standard login portal. I changed my password. On July 7th, the audio feed reactivated again. Same timestamp, 02:14 a.m. Same credentials, mine. I did not reactivate it. The audio continued broadcasting, breathing, footsteps, verbal reports, all in my voice. On July 9th, I submitted my resignation. Before leaving, I reviewed the entire audio archive from Camera 19. The recording spanned 9 weeks, beginning on May 4th. 6 weeks before the first maintenance alert. Every night at 2:14 a.m., the audio feed activated. Breathing, footsteps, verbal reports, all in my voice. All describing corridor inspections I never conducted. I checked the badge access log. No entries for Corridor J on any of the recorded dates. But the audio was continuous, clear, and detailed. On my final day, I listened to the most recent recording from July 8th. At 6:02 a.m., the voice, my voice, spoke. End of shift acknowledged. Documentation complete. Next shift begins at 21:45. I checked my work schedule. My next shift had been scheduled for July 9th at 9:45 p.m., 21:45 in military time. I left Wellspring on July 9th and did not return, but according to facility logs, Camera 19's audio feed remains active. Every night at 2:14 a.m. it begins recording. Breathing, footsteps, verbal reports, all in my voice, and every morning at 6:02 a.m. the voice concludes, end of shift acknowledged. Sometimes the microphone hears what hasn't happened yet. Sometimes the voice conducting inspections belongs to someone who already left. And sometimes you realize the reports you're hearing are the ones you'll file tomorrow, or the ones you filed in a corridor you'll never remember walking.